Something that I hear quite commonly from many people on the spiritual path is how hard they try and how difficult it can be to practice these various methods or implement these various principles and so on. And this may be in regard to all kinds of spiritual practice, not merely things like meditation or rituals, but also in regard to working with our ordinary everyday challenges, learning to be more attentive and less reactive, letting go of various attachments and expectations, resolving emotional blockages or negative thought patterns, shifting our perspective, being more present, and so on. People often say that they're trying very hard to implement these practices and principles into their lives, but it can be quite frustrating, even to the point of exhaustion, to the point that you just don't want to bother with it anymore. You're worn out, you're tired, you feel like you just can't do it anymore. And yet you know you must, because the alternative is to just continue as you have, which has been not only deeply dissatisfying, but has probably caused you a great deal of suffering. And we just don't want to live that way. We're tired of all that as well. We want to evolve beyond it to something better, something more spacious, something more pleasant. So we see this need to change in regard to our way of thinking and perceiving, our way of living and relating and so on. And yet it also seems that the harder we try, the harder it is. And I've experienced this myself many times along the way, and I can attest to how frustrating it is, to how exhausting it is, and how you come to a point at which you just get fed up with it all. And you say to yourself, what's the point? I try and nothing really changes. I try so hard and all that comes of it is exhaustion. But somewhere along the way, I came across a profound and yet very simple piece of advice which really helped me on my journey. If trying hard has not been working, try softer. And I'm reminded of a story about a monk who asked his teacher, if I try hard enough, how long do you think it will take me to become liberated? And the teacher said, 5 years. The monk thought about this. 5 years? That seems like a really long time. What if I double my effort? What if I try harder? Then how long do you think it might take? The teacher replied, 10 years. You see, in terms of material life, if you want to achieve something or build something or improve something, you have to apply some effort. And it tends to be that the greater the effort, the better the result. So for example, if you want to lose some weight or put on some muscle, you have to make an exerted effort. You have to exercise. You have to push your body quite hard. Not too hard, of course, or you might injure yourself. But certainly much harder than you normally would in your ordinary everyday activities. And when it comes to spirituality, we often try to apply this same principle. Work hard, make a lot of effort, push yourself, and yet it just doesn't seem to work. Because the paradox in all of this is that with spirituality, it's quite the opposite. And all that exertion actually slows us down. If you take, for example, letting go, this is something that a lot of people struggle with, how to let go. People often say they're trying really hard to let go of some attachment or what have you. But letting go doesn't require any effort. In fact, letting go is a releasing of all effort. It's a kind of relaxation. And it's like when someone says, try to relax. Well, that's not how relaxation works. You don't try to relax. Try implies effort, which means to exert energy, whereas relaxation implies making no effort and instead releasing or conserving energy. So in terms of spiritual practice, whatever form that happens to take, the idea is to relax into it, to relax your effort, to just flow with it. Now, I'm still trying to find a better word, an alternative to the word effort, because in spiritual practice, we do have our aspiration. We do have some sense of what we'd like to see change or a direction we'd like to move in, but effort is not quite the right word. Neither is struggle or strive, because all of these imply an exertion of energy. And not only do they imply exerting energy, they also tend to imply resistance of some sort. And spirituality is very much about releasing resistance, because resistance ultimately is the cause of so much suffering. And yet we do make some determination to engage in spiritual practice. Perhaps engagement is the word that I'm looking for, because engagement is much softer than effort. Engagement means to be active or involved, to attend to something, and that doesn't necessarily imply exertion. Attend is also perhaps a better word to use. It's closely related to the word attention, to direct one's attention to something, to be attentive, to be mindful, to be present. So perhaps we can begin to approach our practice with attentiveness rather than with effort, to engage rather than to exert. Now, I also want to share another approach to all of this, which has been very helpful to me. And I would probably call it the experimental approach to spiritual practice. Because when we experiment, we begin with some hypothesis. We have some idea of what the result might be or what we would like it to be. But we aren't really attached to it. We don't really know if the method is going to have that result. That's what makes it an experiment. We're doing it to find out if it works, which means it may not work, or there may be some other result entirely. And so we have to remain open to all of these possibilities. There's more openness in experimentation. We're open to results, whatever they may be. But we don't really have a lot of expectation. It's more a kind of curiosity. Think of a child exploring the world, just looking at everything in wonder, wanting to understand how it all works, but not with any sense of seriousness or urgency, just with a relaxed and gentle curiosity. So for example, when a lot of people take up meditation, there's usually some expectation that if I sit and meditate, my mind is going to become calm and I'm going to feel very peaceful. But when I actually sit down to do this for the very first time, I find that the mind is very active and noisy. And the more that I try to control it, to silence it, the louder it gets, and I just wind up agitated. I find that I'm trying to force an experience of relaxation rather than simply relaxing. I'm trying to force a sense of peacefulness rather than simply resting. I'm trying to force stillness rather than simply being still. But if I take an experimental approach to just have a kind of gentle curiosity, I say to myself, what happens if I don't try to force anything? What happens if I just relax my effort? What happens if I let go of my expectations? What if I just allow everything to be as it is, including the fact that the mind is generating all these thoughts? And what if I don't fight with any of that and just allow it? And what might happen if I just observe all of this without getting involved in it, if I don't grasp onto any thought nor try to push it away, but just observe how they come and go? And what if I offer my attention to the sensation of the breath, not trying to control it, not trying to escape from thinking, but just being curious about that sensation? What if I give all my attention just to that sensation? Or perhaps to the sounds around me that I normally don't pay any attention to? What if I just give my attention to that? What does it sound like? What might I hear that I normally would not hear when I'm all wrapped up in thinking? So this is an entirely different approach than what most of us do, and this works well with virtually every practice. So for another example, if we're experiencing some kind of emotional disturbance, we can try an experiment. What happens if I just sit with this feeling, neither indulging it nor repressing it, neither grasping nor pushing, but just allowing its space to move through me unimpeded, just allowing it to be felt and experienced? What if I just allow this feeling without trying to get rid of it? What might happen if I let go of any judgment that I have about it, whether it's good or bad, and just allow it to be whatever it is? And then, in addition to experimentation, there can also be exploration, which is similar in that we don't know where it might take us. We don't know what the terrain might be like, but we're curious to find out. So where might this feeling be arising from? What's beneath it? Can I go into it and just look? To just look with curiosity, to find out where it arises from. Not trying to change it, not trying to get rid of it, but just wanting to understand it. Just curious to see where it comes from and what it's comprised of. So in all of this, we might ask, what happens if I don't try so hard? If I don't exert so much effort? What happens if I relax that effort and soften my approach? What if instead of trying to achieve some specific outcome, instead of having some specific expectation or being attached to that expectation, what if I let that go? What if I just open up more to just be more receptive and just see what happens? So just as an experiment, see what might happen if you try this softer approach. And don't be attached to any outcome or expectation in regard to it. Just try it with a gentle curiosity and see what happens. If you find value in this content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe.